In his speech, Schumer indicated that he would reintroduce the Cannabis Authorization and Opportunity Act later this year. So my question, Ben, is Chuck Schumer suffering from dementia? Everyone, welcome to our Trade to Black podcast. Back from Miami and 30 inches of rain in 3 days. But overall, good conference. Mood was somewhat somber pertaining to cannabis, but it was the biggest event yet. And we'll dive in to what we learned while we were there. But most importantly, let's bring in the gents. Staying dry in Fort Lauderdale, Anthony. What a couple of days that was.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. It's the first. I've been through a lot of hurricanes. I've never seen anything like that. It was literally everything east of 95. Now that I know it's in a floodplain, 2.5 feet of water just moved in within like an hour. I basically had to get out of my car at 2:00 in the morning, park it on the side of the road, and walk 1.5 miles home in about 2 feet of water.
Jesus, jeepers.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
It was fun. Yeah.
9 a.m. you left the dinner and got home at 2 a.m.
Yeah. 9 p.m. I left the dinner. 2 a.m. I got home.
5 hours, and your house from Miami is 30 miles. Well, we went down south, and it looks like we got some Canadian weather. And then meanwhile, last week, Ben, there was like Florida weather here in Canada, from what I hear. Beautiful weather. How you doing, brother?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Looks like I made the right call. I had some business over here, so I didn't attend the cannabis conference in Miami. But we had 85 Fahrenheit weather here for like 2 or 3 days straight. So it looks like
really?
Yeah.
Was it 85 degrees?
Yeah, absolutely. It was about it's about low 80s, mid 80s. It reached for about 2 or 3 days. So it looks like the weather reversed, and I made the right call ultimately.
Wow. That's crazy. Well, it was a good time. We learned a lot while we were in Miami. Obviously, we were communicating information to you, Ben, while we were there. Like I said off the top, a little bit of a somber mood for the overall space and no catalyst announcements on the near-term horizon. However, I do want to begin with an announcement, more notably Terrascend, who filed a preliminary proxy statement with the SEC this week in connection with the company's proposed listing of its common shares on the TSX. So next steps, there's going to be a shareholder vote scheduled to occur at the general meeting on June 22nd, which will likely pass, assuming that the shareholder vote on necessary share structure satisfies the TSX. So the company expects this to list on the TSX shortly thereafter. So if that indeed does happen, Ben, how important is this as far as a shift or turning point for the industry?
Well, I would put this in the category of sort of important. I mean, it's not a game changer in terms of, I don't think the cannabis market is going to have all the, the top players is all of a sudden going to rise, or even Terrascend's going to all of a sudden explode out of the gate and, rise 100% or whatever on that news. I mean, today it's about flat. So even though it's, the vote's a couple months out, people aren't front running yet. So that gives you an indication that maybe, the ultimate reaction's going to be muted. But I think cumulatively, if Terrascend could set a precedent for other MSOs to eventually list, then it could be good for the market in general, right? If Curaleaf,
will that happen?
If GTI
will that happen? You think shortly after?
You know what? Right now, at this point, I don't know. I don't know if it's a Terrascend specific thing, because of course they have that relationship with Canopy Growth, and there's some dynamics there. GTI and Curaleaf don't have the same relationships, so I'm not quite sure how to parse all that information, whether it will actually apply to others. But if it does, then it will be very good for the industry. Jason Wild came out today in a tweet and said that his baseline expectation is that volume is going to increase about fourfold from where it currently sits on average daily volume on the CSE. So if you get a fourfold increase, which seems pretty plausible to me because more institutional participation can happen, then that's going to be material for the sector. That will definitely help get more players into these shares.
Fourfold. What do you think that does for the stock, Anthony?
I mean, I hope it gets the share price up. Full disclosure, I'm a decent-sized shareholder in Terrascend. I don't get too worked up anymore over capital markets news. I think an uplisting is good for the sector. I think bringing in potentially more volume is great for the stock. I'm still sitting here with the same message, waiting on regulatory shifts, waiting on something like 280E, and uplisting to the TSX is great, but I don't think it moves the needle in either direction.
Yeah, it's important to note that, all the underlying issues, some of the headwinds, 280E is not, so the earnings quality is not going to be affected by this. So it's just strictly a
Yeah.
trading exchange phenomenon.
Yeah.
The extra volume will help, but are people going to pile in, with some of the existing
No.
headwinds? Not necessarily. Well, like the market's in a different place right now than if this news came out, 18 months ago, 2 years ago, right? So that's the reality that we face right now.
2 years ago, the stock's ripping. This 2 years ago, 4 years ago, the stock is probably going to double with the press release coming out. But I mean, as far as I'm concerned, like capital markets news, it's great, it's progress, but like I said, it doesn't move the needle for me whatsoever.
Okay, so don't read too much into this then.
No, but it's great though. I mean, I commend Jason for being first to attempt it and hopefully the first to pull it off.
Yeah, be curious to see how the industry does pivot and what will transpire from this. Want to shift now to Washington. Lots of festivities occurring at the Capitol Hill earlier this week, knowing it was 420, which was part of the Cannabis Policy Summit's Congressional Forum. There were several prominent politicians who spoke at the event, including Republican David Joyce and Nancy Mace, as well as our boy, Senator Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. In his speech, Schumer indicated that he would reintroduce the Cannabis Authorization and Opportunity Act later this year. So my question, Ben, is Chuck Schumer suffering from dementia?
At this point, I don't. He could be. Joe Biden's, sibling or whatever in that domain. But at this point, I personally kind of tune out all this. I mean, there's so much disappointment and under delivering of expectations from politicians. At this point, I'm really just looking forward to HHS Secretary Becerra making that rescheduling ruling on cannabis from Schedule 1, hopefully down to something else, because to me, this is going to set the table for other things downstream, right? If that can move the needle to Schedule 3 and beyond, that takes out 280E, and that also gives the impetus for more political will to act on some of these bills. Like right now, I just don't see anything moving, right? I mean, to reintroduce the COA Act, it never even got a floor vote because it didn't have enough support. So why would it now? I don't see anything different, happening on that front. And if that was the big policy news that he gave, I don't look at that as moving the needle.
You're smirking over there, Anthony. Like, I know last week when we were in Miami, are you agreeing with me that the mood was somber while we were there?
The mood was somber, but I mean, the thing that I thought that was positive is we were talking to a lot of the big money guys in the space, and they weren't bearish. They're looking forward to the future. I mean, they're not retracting; they're expanding, if anything. As far as their capital allocation goes, they're just being much more disciplined and doing much more diligence when going into this. And now the deals are few and far between. But the capital's there. I don't know how much growth capital is going to be there versus the capital that's going to go into real estate infrastructure and more on the venture side. But I mean, Schumer, it's textbook U.S. politics. It's like they think we're idiots and we don't pay attention to what's going on. Like, you can only be a master politician for so long, and then people kind of understand the grift that's happening. He's introducing legislation that didn't work the first time. These optics don't work. Like, no one's believing it. Like, as it is now, if you look at the sentiment on Twitter and you look at the conversations that we're having with like top insiders in the industry, like, this is all smoke and mirrors. This is so he can be a friend. He can be seen on the surface as a friend of the cannabis industry. However, everyone knows it's like, this isn't going to get passed. So like, why are you wasting time? Like, one of the main things that we talked about last week when we were with Jason Wild and a bunch of other people was it needs to be incremental. Comprehensive reform is never going to get passed. This needs to be incremental.
Explain what you mean by that.
So with the bills that are passed within the U.S. government, I mean, comprehensive, they start to jam shit in there. You're going to see, these are just examples. They're not in the COA Act or any of the legislation, but they'll throw in things for like infrastructure, Ukraine, like frivolous spending, because they'll say, look, I'll sign on for the vote, but you need to get my cause in there as well. And that's why these bills die and they never get anywhere. Incremental, you have your use case, you have your case that you want to move forward. It's very clear, black and white, and it usually can get through if done the right way. This comprehensive shit always gets shot down. Within the approval process.
I would argue that if Chuck Schumer really wanted COA to pass, then he should have found a way to get safe banking through and call it standalone vote with 60 votes to get safe passed during the last legislative session. If he was really interested in that, that would have been the incremental that you're talking about, right? Like now we have SAFE, we've moved the ball forward. Now maybe we can talk about COA. But, him and, he didn't get anything done there for whatever the reason. And now he wants to reintroduce COA. It's dead on arrival.
I don't know how much pull a lot of these executives can really provide, but one of the things that we were at this fundraising event was the Democratic Congressman Dean Phillips was making a speech, and he was encouraging a lot of these executives to actually come to Washington and advocate for the industry, meaning like the Jason Wilds and Boris Jordans that were in attendance, which somewhat surprised me. That I realize they have lobbyists, but I'm surprised that they haven't been doing this all along. But if they were to actually go to Washington, advocate for the industry, can much make out of that? No.
You don't think Boris, guys like Boris and Ben Kovler know that if they were in Washington and they could pull the right levers, that things would get done? They'd fucking be there. Like, don't get me wrong. Like I was in line with a lot of things that the representative was saying, but it was a lot of political banter.
Wasn't it?
It was a lot of what we wanted to hear, what he's down for the cause. Like Ben is part of a very powerful U.S. family. Boris is a multi-billion-dollar international businessman. You don't think that if they knew they could go to Washington right now, sit down with the right people, and pull levers and create a concerted effort to push this forward, they would? Because I think that they would both be first in line to be doing that.
Well, we got a tweet up yesterday, right, to look at the lobby spend that cannabis spent in Washington last year. 2022, the industry spent $5.2 million. And that was only marginally above what they spent in 2019. Big Pharma spends over $350 million. So who do you think the politicians are going to favor, right? Do you think Big Cannabis has any chance when they're a quasi-competitor to Big Pharma? I mean, that's a big problem. So they got to spend more time there, put much more money into it, and maybe they can start to move the needle with some of these politicians and the way they vote and the way evangelize.
That number's crazy to me. I mean, I bet you that there's been more money. I know that there's been more money spent lobbying the state of Florida for like adult use or for licenses versus what they spent on the national level.
That's crazy. Yeah.
One
thing's for sure, though, we've been told for the last couple of years, focus on the top 3 to 4 MSOs and leave everything, and you should be fine. But the investment strategy, let's face it, there's investor fatigue. Nothing really catalyst moments in the near-term future. But when you look at some of these companies, and I will, full disclosure, MariMed is a client of ours, but what I'm hearing a lot from a lot of people like the Tim Seymours of the world who are saying it's probably the best unknown stock in the industry. But regardless, I'm not here to promote the company. It's like the sentiment that I did receive is that, look, revenue is increasing. Obviously, profits is number one priority. The overall industry is maturing. And a lot of people, fundamentals like the MariMeds, even Tilt Holdings, are starting to garner a lot of interest from like a lot of research analysts while we were there. But do you not believe the industry, Ben, like as far as the strategy, focus on the top 3 to 4 MSOs, that people that are still interested in this space will start to pivot and look at things from a different angle?
Yeah, I would think so, especially to your point on the net income side and the operators generating cash flow. Because if they can do it in this environment where industry headwinds have been fierce, pricing, we all know the story on that, then it gives you a lot of confidence that when things turn around, that these are still going to be the strong companies that will generate even more cash. So you have a lot of options when your cash balance after every quarter is incrementally going up, right, and not down. So you don't have to tap the markets for financing, do private placements, things like that. So absolutely, I believe so. I put GTI in that category as well. Strong net income there, and it gives them a lot of options, especially if they don't have a lot of debt.
Yeah. I want to pivot now to psychedelics. There was the third day that was there. It was a lot smaller than what cannabis was, but a lot of the people that I was speaking with, and I was very interested, and I think we need to bring this up as far as the announcement last week involving Numinus and their new Numinus network, this licensing agreement. But we interviewed, obviously, Peyton Nyquist earlier this week, but this really expands their national footprint without any additional CapEx. They're going to be collecting data from a lot of these clinics, but what did you make of the announcement pertaining to Numinus? Because the feedback that I'm receiving last week is there's a lot of people that are very, very interested and impressed with the model that they're building out, Ben.
Well, my initial reaction is that it was a positive, and we look no further than what happened to Field Trip Health. We look at their statements and how much they were spending on opening up these clinics. It was substantial, and these guys raised that. I believe it was what. $200 million, something like that. I wrote an article about it. The number's not coming to me offhand, but
Was it that
something
much?
in
Wow.
that range. Over $200 million they raised, and yet they went bankrupt. And a large
Yeah.
part is because they opened up clinics in these big metropolitan areas, and their expenses were too high. G&A, the capex associated with these clinics, etc. So they ran out of money. What Numinus wants to do, while they still have money on their cash balance, is to license that out, help these people get their own clinics, and they partnered up with Healing REIT as well to allow that to happen, and that allows them to potentially grow without having to spend all this capital expenditures and then draw down from their balance sheet. So while the model is a little unproven yet, I'm very positive on what could happen here.
Well, one thing that Peyton said is regardless of what trial you're doing in drug development, what compound you're focusing on, it's got to have an endpoint, which is a clinical model. And right now, being profitable, not to mention their partnership with MAPS, and they're viewed right now as the leading educator for therapists, Numinus is, with 50,000 therapists needed. But to your point a couple podcasts ago, Anthony, is that a lot of these ketamine clinics are not having the psychedelic-assisted therapy associated with it, which is a vital point of the overall process of getting better. But anyway, your thoughts?
I love it. I mean, also, full disclosure, I'm a shareholder in Numinus as well. I love what Peyton's doing. I mean, I've met Peyton when they took the company public. I mean, I think he's one of the best operators in the space. He understands it from a fundamentals perspective, and he also understands it from a patient perspective, and I'm excited to see what they do. I mean, this is a big announcement. I think they're tackling it the right way, and it's going to be very, very important and vital to the sector's success that they get this right, because I don't know anybody else that's doing that right now, and it's going to be the way that patients get into these therapeutic routines.
Yeah,
I think the big separator too, if I might add, the big separator is going to be if MDMA and psilocybin therapy get approved, because like you said, they have the line on how to train these clinicians, right, to do this, and then they're going to have the model in place, and those are going to be the high margin services that they offer. $10,000, $15,000 insurance paid, so that's going to be the big separator. And along with the Numinus network, if they get a bunch of these clinics online with those big high margin services, then it's going to be a big moment for them.
Cleveland Clinic is already having conversations like what's a Cleveland Clinic? A multi-billion-dollar industry or company?
Cleveland Clinic is a multi-billion-dollar hospital operator in the U.S.
Yeah, he said in our podcast this week they are interested in what they're building out, but you build it out first, and we'll see how things obviously move from a legislation standpoint over the next couple of years. To your point, Ben. Before we go any further, all views in the Trade of Black podcast, the guests on this podcast are purely opinion. You should not treat any opinions expressed by us or guests as investment advice. And the views on this podcast are solely intended to be informational and are not investment advice. In full disclosure, I as well am a shareholder of Numinus Wellness. Let's now shift. Wow, there's some interesting news pertaining to crypto from the European Parliament, who passed landmark crypto legislation this week. Markets in crypto, otherwise known as MICA, received 517 votes in favor, 38 against, and 18 abstentions. So first off, for those that don't, I guess, understand some of the landscape that's going over in Europe, what is MICA, Anthony?
It's a comprehensive regulatory framework on how to manage the budding crypto industry. It includes regulations around stablecoins that are going to have to hold reserves, such as centralized financial institutions or banks, which is good. If you're a stablecoin and your coin is backed on a one-to-one basis via a fiat currency, you should have reserves that are backing up those tokens that are in circulation. Other regulations around blockchain projects, NFT projects, Web3 projects, they're going to actually have to submit comprehensive white papers and business plans to the regulatory bodies and get approval of those, and then stick to those as they mature as a company. This is great. I mean, it's very, very positive to see. It's comprehensive legislation that makes sense, that isn't It's not it's not going to impede progress or impede innovation or stifle innovation. It's going to give them a framework to basically adhere to and grow around. This is actually only applicable
Mind me
to
asking
the
how
EU.
so? Like, I've always heard from crypto investors when it comes to legislation, they're very skeptical. But why did this make sense? What? I guess
Because it makes, I mean, it's light and it's easy, and it allows the crypto companies to transact and be doing the exact same things that they're doing already. I
Yeah.
mean, these stablecoin issuers, they should have the capital deposits that are backing up the stablecoins. If they don't and they can't pass an audit, they were a bad actor and they shouldn't be in business in the first place. With the Web3 space and the NFT space, if you put out a white paper, that is just as serious as putting out a business plan. If I'm an entrepreneur and I go present to you a pitch deck and an investment plan and I don't adhere to it, that's fraud. I can get sued. It's the same thing and the same framework that these crypto companies need to operate around as well. And if they don't, they're going to have legal ramifications. But at the same time, they're not having to operate any differently than they are right now. What I am curious to see, though, is how the UK builds their regulations in line with what's going on with MICA right now, because the UK is its own governing body after
Right.
Brexit, and it doesn't have to adhere to what's going on in the EU. So I mean, I think that the UK is probably going to follow suit very closely to this. They might err on the side of a little bit looser versus more restrictive, but I'm watching that pretty closely.
Anthony, speaking of regulations, there's a lot of news this week. Gary Gensler was in the news, the SEC chair, and he was saying all these crazy things about crypto. He was saying it was a security risk. He blamed it for the failure of Signature Bank, et cetera, et cetera. Is the SEC trying to demoralize or diminish crypto, or do they actually want a proper framework? I'm sort of debating which it is, if they want to jettison it entirely or actually create a proper framework around it.
So I don't think I don't like Gary Gensler. I don't agree with the way that he's going about the situation. However, I don't think he's as big of a villain as everyone is making him out to be. He actually does, because he actually does understand crypto. There's fucking videos online of him giving presentations and giving like TED Talks at MIT around Algorand and around other crypto blockchains. He understands what's going on. But at the same time, Congress haven't given any sort of framework as to how or guidance as to how the SEC should act. Okay. So it's kind of like a Mexican standoff, but I don't think either party wants to progress it, because it's kind of it's a very tough situation right now because no one knows what to do. But the SEC is telling Congress, hey, we need this. Congress is telling the SEC, hey, we need this. Yet the only framework that Gensler has at his disposal is the framework that is securities law, and that's applicable to stocks, and that's applicable to financial institutions that are in the TradFi markets. So obviously Gary's going to defer that crypto should follow under that purview. However, if you watch his testimony, he dodged every question. Like, they asked him if Ethereum was a commodity or a security. He simply just said yes. He didn't say it was one. He didn't say it was the other. He had no answer to the question.
Why is he still ambiguous?
A lot of the other, because he can't say, because he doesn't even know. He can't talk, because if he does say one thing, it's going to be, that's gospel.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I genuinely believe that he doesn't really know where it lies on which side of the line. He just, as far as I'm concerned, and I mean, this is on his side, he only has TradFi SEC regulations to kind of govern crypto with, which don't fit.
How much influence do you think what MICA just did will have on the SEC? Will be any at all on how they look at things as to like what to do right? None, huh? Why?
Zero. I don't think we care. We're going to govern it the way that we want to govern it.
Yeah.
I think that it shows that we need to get our shit together, otherwise we're going to be left in the dust. But the fact of the matter is all of the smartest minds in the sector are still in the U.S. They still want to be in the U.S. They're still coming to the U.S. But I mean, Brian Armstrong is actually in Washington right now talking to Congress and the senators about crypto, about moving regulations and moving things forward. But he said last week, he's like, look, like if we don't get it together, like Coinbase is going to leave. Like Coinbase can operate offshore, and they will if they're put into a box and they're not allowed to be able to act as well as they should.
I'm still trying to figure out whether that's what the U.S. actually wants. This is sort of reminiscent about what happened in 2018. Remember when Bitcoin, like most of the Bitcoin exchanges and the trading was taking place in China, and basically China drove all those exchanges elsewhere, and they drove it off the mainland because it was crypto was being used as a money exit for people to funnel money offshore, right?
So there was a really interesting article that I read this week. So in Hong Kong, which is one of the financial hubs of Asia, obviously, there are Chinese state-sponsored banks and Chinese state-sponsored financial institutions that are custodializing crypto, starting crypto companies, and lending against crypto. Meanwhile, crypto is completely outlawed in mainland China. So anything from my perspective that's state-sponsored in China usually follows the mandates that they adhere to in mainland China. The only thing that I can think of, and it's kind of a scary way to, I guess, think about it, is they're like, okay, well, we'll take these state-sponsored institutions, allow them to act in Hong Kong, and then once they reach critical mass, just cut them off at the knees. And then, I mean, you basically have all of the crypto aggregated as well as consumer funds, and then you just launch a CBDC or a digital yuan, and nobody can do anything about it. I could be completely wrong. I mean, that's really not the way to look at things from a conspiratorial point of view. But I thought it was really, really strange that state-sponsored entities state-sponsored linked entities in Hong Kong were acting completely different than they were mandated to in mainland China.
Yeah, especially with that history of driving the exchanges off the mainland, right? And then you have almost a reversal of that. Now they're kind of supporting that through state.
I mean, a lot of the Bitcoin mining came here when China dropped the ban on Bitcoin and the ban on mining. But I mean, also, if you look at a chart, every time China has banned Bitcoin, which I think it's been 6 times already, it's gone up every time. Yeah, every time.
Interesting stuff. I did have good conversation when I was in Miami. Rob Seacrest, who's got some pretty good political contacts in Washington, and some of the people he speaks with, as much as there seems like complete disarray in the U.S. right now, there's a lot of powers to be that said, don't ever short sell the U.S., that we're going to be just fine. And I thought that was rather encouraging just to hear.
We're not going anywhere.
So as much as we're seeing... No, this global currency of India, Russia, and so on and so forth. Don't kid yourself. Like, the end is not near, and I know a lot of people are.
It's fearful.
It depends how long the current administration stays in, I guess. But no, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, we need. Yeah. I mean, I think we genuinely need change. I mean, there needs to be a president that's like under 50, somewhere within the generation. Somewhere within the generation that understands exactly what's going on from a technological and social aspect. I mean, Andrew Yang right now is actually trying to craft a third party that's an option outside of Democrats and Republicans. And I mean, I think
that's not going to work.
That's what really. It's not going to work, but it's what needs to happen.
That may work in 20. Well, that may work in 20 years, just not right now.
I mean, people last night on the news were talking about that they would vote Joe Biden back in simply because of loyalty to the party. Even if better candidates rose or better candidates tried to challenge him, due to the loyalty to the party, they would still support Joe Biden at 82 years old, who would be 86 if he survived his term in office.
Imagine?
That's crazy.
Well, when I was speaking to Rob, he's explained to me the Democratic Party is notorious. It's like creating fear. If you don't do this, this is what could happen. And I see that right now as far as the controlling aspect as to like how this administration has worked for the past 4 years. But there's no real proactive, like, What's the flip side? What's the excitement? What's the future look like? And
the problem is now
I just
is
think
DeSantis
that, well,
is DeSantis can't. He's unelectable on the national stage. Like he just enacted a 6-week a bill that's a 6-week term on abortion in Florida.
Yeah, it's
on a national stage. You're dead in the water. You don't even have to debate. All they have to do is bring that up, and you're dead.
Speaking of Florida, so I'll wrap this up. We left Miami on, what was it, Friday? I canceled my flight and went up and visited my brother that was up in Fort Lauderdale, where you're at, for this Tortuga country music festival. What a shit show that was. I thought I was in a scene of Star Wars. Like, if you want to drink, come prepared to drink, obviously, during that weekend. I'm not a big drinker, but wow, you've been down there at all? Ever, Anthony?
I was there. I was just on a yacht in the water watching the stage on Friday.
Smart.
I won't go anywhere near.
Smart.
You know who was there the whole weekend was Brady. I saw Brady was there and decked out in sunburn gear. The entire
oh
the
my
entire
God,
weekend.
was he really?
Yeah, him and his wife were in that VIP structure, decked out in sunburn.
Oh, nice.
Gear.
By the way, just out of curiosity, not to plug Brady, we have no affiliation with them or anything like that. But how's the cannabis? Does he grow good cannabis over there?
He does. Yeah. He grows very good. He actually grows very good cannabis. Sunburn's got really good flower, and they've got really good extracts and products that they have. He's done a good job so far.
Who would have thought, Ben? You can actually build good product, walk before you run, and you can build a great business model.
Oh, there's good products. You know
why?
In Florida.
Oh yeah. I just can't believe when I walk around there that rec is not legalized yet. It just seems crazy, but that's
coming.
2 years maybe. Yeah.
You don't realize how conservative and how like Bible Belt Florida is once you get outside of Palm Beach. It's the South.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's literally like very conservative.
All right, gents. Well, we'll catch back with you early next week. We got T-4 days until the NFL draft. Be curious to see who's going to go. Look at my dogs making her appearance on the podcast. But anyways, I will keep in touch, and I'll check out with you guys later.
Awesome.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Take care. Bye. Hey everyone, thanks for watching, and if you want to learn more about the emerging industries that we cover, then leave a comment below and let us know who you want us to interview, the questions you want asked, and the information that you want to learn. We want to hear from you. As usual, click on that bell for all notifications to get the latest information, share this video with your network, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel because we would not be here without you. Thanks for watching, everyone.